I had just a terrible relationship with money. I had piles of unopened bills. When I look back at it, I was doing everything I possibly could to sabotage my relationship with money. If you don't have a healthy relationship with money to begin with, your unhealthy relationship with money will get in the way of being able to receive that money. But for so many of us, we're not taught about money in that deliberate fashion. I had learned a lot of things like that money equaled being greedy, that money equaled superficiality, that money equaled suffering. And when I look at those things, none of those things are aligned with my values. We all have a very unique relationship with money. And if you can identify, okay, where did I learn it? And then question what you've learned, it creates such a beautiful foundation for all of this manifestation work, all of this creation work. But it's really the core piece of education that's missing for most of us.
The power you seek lies within you, as we are each infinite beings living a human experience. The truth of who and what we are has been hidden from us until now. Awaken, my friends, to this new reality that we are in fact creating everything through the power and the gift of our wonderful imagination. Join me as I unlock the secrets of our past and reveal the truth that has been clouded in this veil we call life. What reality will you choose to create today? The choice is yours. Welcome, my friends, to My Reality Practice. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on the Reality Practice podcast. My name is Joey. I'll be your host, and today's guest is Kerry Cudmore. Kerry is a certified professional business coach, a master empowerment leader, and a Firewalker instructor. She is an author of She is the author of A New Relationship with Money and creator and founder of the Spiritual Finance Initiative, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to changing our individual and collective relationship with money. She creates and teaches methods to make complex concepts easy to approach, understand, and master, helping her clients and class participants create fearlessly joyful, prosperous, and fulfilling lives and businesses. So without further delay, let's welcome Kerry to the show. How are you doing today, Kerry?
I'm doing great. It's so good to be here. So good to get to know you, and happy to dive in deep with you today.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I wanted to have you on the show, like mainly, I mean, you've got many ways we can go here with it, but like the biggest thing I wanted to get out first and foremost was diving into this idea of one of the biggest topics, I think, in manifesting and in reality creation, period, is the idea of money and creating money. How do we do it? I want to dive deep into this. Most people work jobs or have their own businesses, or they envision they want to win the lottery. And sometimes money just comes to us unexpectedly. I know for me, it's just literally, I have had money over the last couple of years just flowing in hundreds of thousands of dollars in completely and totally unexpected ways that didn't exist until my journey kind of really started, and my manifesting and understanding how it worked. And the next thing you know, it just started flowing to me. And it's like, I couldn't even shut it off if I wanted to. It's amazing. But I technically don't even know if I understand what I've done and how I've turned a faucet on. So I can't wait for you to share with everybody how this works. How do we get rich? I think that's the biggest question.
Well, I think that there are ways to get rich, but the thing you have to do first is create the healthy relationship with money that will allow you to receive it when you do, dive into manifesting and creation. If you don't have a healthy relationship with money to begin with, your unhealthy relationship with money will get in the way of being able to receive that money. So that's the core work that we do in spiritual finance, is help people create that healthy relationship with money to begin with, so that all this other work that you do around manifestation and creation can actually work. And so that all that great financial advice you can get from people will actually work, because until you've got that great relationship with money, it's going to get in the way of receiving and implementing any of that.
That's a powerful thought. You know, the idea of a healthy relationship with money. We all feel like, oh, money's good. I have a healthy relationship with it. I make it, I earn it. It goes in my, but we're always robbing Peter to pay Paul. Most of the world is always coming from a lack mindset, right? I've got a great, story I'll share with you, and maybe you can analyze it a little bit. This was a couple years ago. My wife and I, we had a business mentor that worked with us. And this is right when we were starting to manifest and come into large sums of money. And we'd never had it before, my wife and I, in our lives. Yeah. And he said we had a very bad relationship with money. We had a poor mindset, and we didn't understand what that meant. And one day he shows up from out of the blue and did it with my wife first, and then does it with me. But he has her come into the room, eyes closed, and he places $15,000 in cash in her hands, and she opens her eyes and sees it, holding it. And literally she bursts out into tears, because she never imagined holding $15,000 in cash. And she's just like, it was so overwhelming to her. She was teary-eyed and crying, and then they did the same thing with me. And for me, I opened my eyes and I was blown away. I'm like, this is amazing. But my first thought, my first question was, is there more? How do I make more? How do I get more of this? Like, I want more. So I know my mindset still wasn't probably the right mindset, but they were so two different points of view. One was a emotional point of view. Mine was a I want more of it point of view. But I think they both were coming from lack, weren't they?
Well, perhaps. But what they were coming from was how you learned about money to begin with, because most of us haven't learned about money, or at least most of us who have challenging relationships with money, we haven't learned about money in a deliberate fashion. So think about how we learn about things like the alphabet. We learn what the letter looks like, what it sounds like. We're being taught by somebody who has a mastery around the topic and is a skillful teacher to know how to convey it to us. But for so many of us, we're not taught about money in that deliberate fashion. Instead, we pick up on these beliefs about money without even knowing we're learning anything from what surrounds us. And so we accumulate these over a lifetime without even knowing we're learning anything. So the way you responded was unique to you and what you had accumulated in your relationship with money up to that point. The way your wife responded was unique to her and what she had accumulated in her belief system about money up until that point. And it sounds like that was an experience that helped you reframe to something that is what I think of as being more aligned with our values. So for instance, when I first started changing my relationship with money, it was out of absolute dire necessity. I had just a terrible relationship with money. I had piles of unopened bills. When I look back at it, I was doing everything I possibly could to sabotage my relationship with money. And at that point, I was making plenty of money, but I was still fucking it up. Okay. So when I looked back on how I had learned about money, I had learned a lot of things, like that money equaled being greedy, that money equaled superficiality, that money equaled suffering. And when I look at those things, none of those things are aligned with my values. So I had learned things that were out of alignment with my values. And so what we do is we help people create a relationship with money that's custom tailored to them, that aligns to their values like beautifully, like a custom tailored suit. It has to work that way or it won't work.
You say, let's kind of break it down from the very beginning here for the audience, for the listeners. You talk about how we accumulate over a lifetime this belief about money. Okay, what does that mean? I know what you mean when you say that, but what does that really mean? How are we being programmed? Like in certain instances, like for, how our parents looked at money, like when we were out, like, can you give us some instances of how that programming has occurred either consciously or subconsciously?
Sure, absolutely. So when I think back to that like core work that I did right at the beginning of developing all of this, it was when I started thinking about, okay, so how did I get to such a really chaotic place in relationship with money? And I asked myself that question, how did I learn about money? And the very first memory that I had was when I was in about, I want to say about the 4th grade. And my parents at that point were divorced. And it was one of those messy divorces that never got less messy.
Right.
And I only got to see that. Really? Oh, yes. And so many people can. And so much of it is like tied up with money too.
Absolutely.
So I remember I was only able to see my dad about once a week at that point, and it was always really exciting for me. And when he pulled up that day, there's a longer version of the story. I'm going to try to condense it. I raced to the door to see him. And when I got to the door, my mom paused me and she looked at me and she said, "Ask your father where the money is." And all the excitement that I had to see him, all of the anticipation and happiness that I had just like drained right out of me.
Right. I can see how that, it just literally obliterated all of that excitement and put it on on a lack, on something that was missing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm really clear. My mother was never intending to teach me anything in that moment. I know that it wasn't her intention. It's just, this is how we operate, unconsciously in relationship with money. Right. So I end up going out to my dad's car, sort of crawling my way out there very slowly. And I ask him where the money is, and he's mad. He's angry. He's angry that I was put in the middle and he didn't have the money.
Right. I mean, it stole his moment too, it made it about something else other than the excitement of being with you and the love to share that moment with you. Instead, it's like she stole that moment and put bullshit in the way.
Right. And I don't even think it was that conscious an awareness for him.
No, I wouldn't think so. I mean, she would have to be very strategic if it was, but it sounds like she wasn't. Yeah, it's just one of those things that happens. It's the way you chose to perceive it and the way he chose to perceive it. And that's where our minds default to, right?
And I don't even think there was much conscious choice in that moment. It was unconscious. It was coming from what they had learned about money. So then I went back to my mom's front door and told her that he didn't have the money. And she just like went from, color, when televisions go from color or movies go from color to black and white, like all the color just drained out of her, all of the energy just drained out of her. And what I witnessed was intense suffering. And so just in this brief experience in my life, I learned several things. I learned that money equaled anger. I learned that money equaled suffering. And I learned that money equaled conflict. And so when I look at what's on the right side of that equation, anger, suffering, conflict, none of those things are aligned with my values.
Right.
None of them.
All of those sound terrible.
They are, but they got mushed in with money. So it meant that if I had money in my life, I was going to have anger, suffering, and conflict in my life. And I learned that's just one example of thousands of examples that I have, that other people have. We all have a very unique relationship with money. And if you can identify, okay, where did I learn it? And then question what you've learned, it creates such a beautiful foundation for all of this manifestation work, all of this creation work. But it's really the core piece of education that's missing for most of us.
And it's the awareness around it all, and the meaning behind what we give it. And I always go back to the idea when you're in the store shopping with your parents, and you want a toy, or you want anything, you come up and say, Mom, can I have this? And what do they always say? No, honey, we can't afford that. I mean, it's like so common for people, just their default, whether they mean it, they can't afford it. It's the excuse that they give, even just to get out of that moment. It's like, we can't afford it. And subconsciously that's going into our minds, and it's always telling us we're living in lack. There's never enough money. We can't afford this. We can't afford that. Therefore, we never can. When we grow up, we don't take care of ourselves. We don't spend money on ourselves. We make excuses, right? We can't afford it. And it's that subconscious programming. So is that really what this is all about then? Changing that programming.
And that's an interesting example, because if you think of that learning that money equals can't afford it, what I find is that when people have had a learning, it's turned into a belief that really motivates how they act with money and what they do with money, how they think about money. I find it goes in one of two directions. If your parents have been, or wherever you've learned that there's not enough and you can't afford it, people either fall in line with the belief or they rebel against it and swing in the opposite direction. So for me, that was a little bit of what happened to me. I had to distance myself from money. I would overspend. I would give it away, like in outrageous ways. So we either fall in line with the belief or we rebel against it. That's like a general, I see this often.
You mentioned, that you found your need to change, that you were dire, it was a dire situation out of necessity. And you mentioned sabotage. One, why do people sabotage ourselves with the idea of money and making it? And kind of plays off of both what you just said. Like, you can either fall in line with the idea of money and that's a form of sabotage, or you can go and completely rebel and just spend it, blow it, like believe nothing like you were taught. And at the same time, that's another form of sabotage. Where the hell where's the middle ground? Like, it's either way we go, we're screwed. It's almost in the idea of sabotage, right?
Sure. And that's just a tip off for me that there's an unhealthy relationship with money. And now let's get to the basics and figure out, how did you get there, and then change it for yourself. I just always understand that people are learning about money all the time throughout their entire lives. And so if you can learn about it through your entire life, you can learn about it now. You can learn about it for yourself and pick and choose what aligns with your unique values. And that's a really important thing, because not everybody has the same values. And just as an example of that, I have a pet cow. His name is Jack. I have a value of being connected with animals and with the earth. And so I invest money in that. It's a very conscious thing that I do. But not everybody wants a cow in their front yard.
I wouldn't mind. I find almost all animals adorable. So I've always wanted a cow too. I see videos of them on Facebook and I'm like, oh my God, that's the cutest thing.
Yeah, but it really is like examining what we believe about money and then getting really deliberate about getting rid of all the stuff that doesn't align with our values. Because until you can describe money in the same exact ways that you would describe your values, you're going to have an issue with money. So imagine creating a relationship with money that you can say, instead of, for me, money equals suffering.
Mhm.
Change it to money equals thriving. Instead of money equals anger, what if money equals joy and happiness?
Right.
Instead of money equals conflict, money equals connection. And when I really defined my relationship with money according to my unique values, that's when I started seeing things
Hmm.
around me shift. I saw that money connects me with everyone and everything because it's connected everywhere. I
Hmm.
saw that money is a vehicle for joy in my life, a vehicle for love in my life. And the more I honed these values to fit me specifically,
Mhm.
the more my relationship grew in a healthy way.
I think, you're hitting the nail on the head in terms of the idea of money. It is 100% the what you place, like the idea of what you believe money to be, the perception of it, because we get caught up with people talk about, oh, well, greed is bad, money is evil, these all these ideas, when money simply is the way we trade one value for another
Right.
value. And when you take out any kind of like negative meaning behind it, it could be coconuts, it could be, fruit. I'll give you 10 fruit, and
Right.
in the meantime, I'll provide you, I'll build a shed for you, or whatever, I mean, just in
Sure.
layman's terms, it's like it's one value for another. So how do we get so caught up in this bullshit idea that it means something bad when it means nothing other than what we
Right.
place upon it? I'll give you this. This is what we, in this day and age, consider valuable. This is
Yeah.
important in order to live my life. So I'll give you that. In return, you do this. And that's all money is. So where did we
Yeah.
get caught up with this greed and evil and just the bullshit behind money?
Well, it's very simple. We learned it. The relationship that you have with your with money is not random. You learned it somewhere, and you accumulate. That's the thing about learning that's not deliberate. If it's circumstantial, we just absorb what's around us. We're learning things in a really messed up way, and they get incorporated in how we deal with money, think about money, the potential for money in our lives. And it's like when you take the blinders off and start to look at it deliberately and crafting it like bespoke tailoring for yourself,
Mhm.
that's when it becomes a healthy relationship for you. But we learned all of these things.
Right.
It doesn't come from nowhere. And that's where, like, if we don't get down to the core of it first, all the best advice,
Mhm.
all of the best teaching about, manifestation and creation can't fully work for us until we clear out all the clutter around our relationship with money, all the things we learned along the way. And for
Right.
people who, go about working with money in a way that just works pretty well for them, they learned that somewhere too. It's not just the negative stuff that we learn. We also learn all the positive stuff.
Right.
It was really interesting for me once I was teaching the class series at a financial planner's office, and he took the class series because he had a great relationship with money. There wasn't any reason for him to take the class series other than to learn more. He wanted to know about it. And what he found out was that he learned great lessons deliberately from his father specifically. And he didn't even know what a big thing that was, and that other people hadn't gotten that gift. He just
Yeah.
had no idea.
You're not raised, if you're raised a certain way, it's everything else is oblivious. You'd think everybody just gets it, that knows that. It's like
Right.
common sense.
Yeah. And so you can track it all back. And that's helpful because when we move something from the unconscious into the conscious, that's when we can change it. You
Hmm.
can't change something that you're not aware of.
Right, right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awareness is such key. Um, I always go back to the idea, and I get into kind of back and forth with people on this when people are adamant about how money is bad or how capitalism is bad, business is bad,
Yeah.
and it's my default always goes back to it's not bad. It's about the person behind that money. Like
Right.
when I have all the abundance that I want, that I desire, and I'm rich, I will then I think of all the good I'm going to be able to do
Right.
with it, all the people I can help, all the businesses
Sure.
I could start up that could impact the
Yep.
world. It's like I don't look at money that it could ever be evil. I look at it as it's only a way for me to give back and to give more. And that makes me more excited to want to make more in order to give more. I mean,
Right.
it's a great repetitive, cycle that I want to get into. Um,
Sure.
and I just live under the philosophy, and I talk a lot about it on my shows, how we're the only ones here. We're creating this reality, and
Yeah.
we were put here and blessed to create anything we want. Like, why would
Sure.
we purposefully, like, God comes here and he wants to deprive himself of all the beauty and all the abundance? No, he came here to experience this. So why not create it? I can have billions of dollars if I wanted. I mean, it's my reality to create,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. And if you asked yourself the question, where did I learn that? You could probably track it back to either the experience you had that you were in the atmosphere of that, or somebody taught it to you directly. You got that from someplace, and not everybody does, but they
Mhm.
can now.
Yeah.
And the one thing I want to touch on is something that you said about, money is just, it could be coconuts. It's something we use to, exchange.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
the thing that I've learned is that money in itself is uniquely human. We
Mm.
created money.
Right.
Money
Yeah. Bees
doesn't
don't use
exist.
honey, or don't use money. They have honey for their form of value, right? And like
Right.
beavers build dams. That's what they do. Humans
Yeah.
acquire money. That's what we do, I guess.
Right. Well, and we invented money.
Yeah.
We invented money. We decide what it does. We decide what it doesn't do. We decide what it means, what it doesn't mean. And because of that, money, I consider money to be uniquely human.
Hmm.
Money's not like my cow, Jack, or my dog, Rue, or the tree that's outside the window. It doesn't have its own unique essence. It
Mhm.
requires us to define its essence, to decide what it does and doesn't do, what we can do with it and not do with it, what the value is of it, which makes it, that's why I use the word relationship. Because money is uniquely human, we can think of it as if it's a relationship and kind of think of it through that filter. So somebody who has an unhealthy relationship with money, if I ask them, just imagine that money could manifest into a human being right now, and you
Hmm.
could have a conversation with money right now, you know, how would that relationship feel? Would it feel like, oh, money's walking in the door and it feels like, hey, how are you doing? Good to see you. Or is it just like, I don't trust you, I don't like you, why are you here? So
That's
you
I
can think of it
totally
along
get that.
those lines.
Huh. I love what you said. Money requires us to define it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never heard that before, but that just resonates so much with me. It's how do each person's individual. We define it however we choose to define it.
Yes.
And there's no good or bad associated with it. It's just our own internal interpretation. I love it. That's brilliant. Before we kind of switch gears and get into a couple other topics that I'm excited to talk
Sure.
about, let's finish up on this idea. Like, if you could short as simply as possible, give some advice. What are the first steps in terms of manifesting money? Like, what is somebody just starting out on this path? What do they need to really focus on and start to understand before they can move on kind of to the next stage and the next stage?
Yeah. The first thing you need to do is ask yourself, what is my relationship with money?
Okay.
Define it for yourself, to just where you are now. How do you define it? and what are the beliefs that you have about money. If
Okay.
you can define what your beliefs are, like, and I think of this as just open your eyes and pay attention to what your beliefs about money are right now. And then you can get curious and ask yourself, where did they come from? That's helpful.
Mhm.
But defining what they are and then changing them so that they align fully with your values. That's the biggest thing you can do as a starting point. And, getting help along the way is helpful, especially we do better in community, I think, as
Yeah.
human beings.
Okay.
And so, we have classes through the Spiritual Finance Initiative that we offer, and it helps people, go through this process in a very mindful, well thought out way that's got a great success rate. And you never have to pay to join one of the class series. We're a nonprofit. So
That's fantastic.
getting help
That's
along the way
amazing.
can be helpful too.
We'll put a link in the description box
Awesome.
below for sure on that. But yeah, make sure, I guess, guys, if you're having any kind of doubts with your mindset of money, that sounds like a fantastic opportunity there to hop on, get in with some group coaching on it.
Yep.
If I can break it down just in terms of reality creation and how this
Mhm.
whole thing works, basically, as simplistically as possible, you're just saying we have to have clarity on what our idea, it's not about the understanding of money, it's where are you at as far as clarity wise in
Yeah.
your beliefs about money. That's the first step, and then start diving in to the understanding why. It's clarity first, then you can
Yep.
go deep and start trying to pick away at the different layers of the onion, right?
Sure. And I think of it as just think of it like a GPS system. I want to navigate towards something. I can't just tell the GPS where I want to go. I also have to tell the GPS where I am now. Otherwise,
I like that.
it's not gonna.
That's perfect. That's a better description as far as the clarity. Yeah, you got to know the end result, but you need to know
Right.
where you're starting at in order to traverse the distance there. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time either. I mentioned coming up with those money equations, money equals something.
Mhm.
If you just come up with as many money equations as you possibly can, just go through your history and get curious, make yourself your most fascinating research project. Get curious about money equals what, and
And it
money
can be
equals
good
what
or bad.
else.
Like just
Yeah, it can
brainstorm
be good or
everything.
bad.
Money equals this good
Yes.
wise, and money equals this bad wise. Money equals
Yep.
this totally confused wise. Whatever
Yes.
money equals to you, just really brainstorm, just kind of puke it out on the page. And then that's
Exactly.
where you've got a starting point. Now you can start to dive in and
Mhm.
understand where you're at and
Well,
why you believe what you believe.
and to give people the next part of the process, you look at whatever's on the right hand side of the equation. So money equals, and then there's something on the right hand side.
Mhm.
Look at those words or phrases or feelings, whatever you've come up with, and ask yourself the question, does this align with my values? If it does, keep it. If it doesn't, cross it out and replace it.
So I guess that even goes a little bit deeper. First, before we can even dive into the money aspect, everybody's got to understand where their values are, so
It's
it's kind of,
helpful.
we've got to go back to ground zero and kind of review, brainstorm, what are my values of life? Then
Yeah.
brainstorm the money and all of that. That way you see where they align. I love that. So thank you so
Yeah.
much
And
for sharing
yeah.
all the wisdom with that, because that's one of the top. I think between manifesting money and finding your soul flame, your soulmate, I think those are like the two most popular topics in the manifestation community. So, thank you. That was a very good crash course, and just how the mind works and how making money or not making money, how it all plays into our mind. So
Sure.
you say on your website, you say fear is the ultimate 4-letter word and that it's an illusion. So let's dive into that as an empowerment coach, because you do
Sure.
some really cool stuff You teach people how to walk on fire, how to walk across glass, how to bend metal with their mind. And this is all about this empowerment coaching that you do. So kind of
Sure.
dive into this. Why are we being held back? Why is fear a 4-letter word?
Well, I think we think of four-letter words as the worst ways to express ourselves, but isn't fear the worst way to express yourself? And most of the time, fear is just bullshit. How often are we afraid, but we're not actually in any physical danger?
Yeah,
But
most of the time. I mean, it's all made
we're
up.
not.
It's right.
Yeah, and so it's the trickster that's telling us we're not safe. So think about times when you feel afraid, but you're not in any physical danger.
Mhm.
You know, your body is telling you, get out. You know, there are 4 fear reactions: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So we know fight, flight, and freeze are pretty standard. We all know what they look like, feel like. Fawning's the really interesting one, and that when we're fawning, we're acquiescing to somebody else's opinion or desire. We're going along for the ride out of usually wanting to be accepted, or being afraid of not fitting in, or being ostracized, something like that. And
Right.
so most of the times when we're feeling fear, though, it's not, and we're not in any danger.
Right.
And so if we can understand that, like look at it and say, and look around, like I feel afraid, notice like the shallow breathing, the sweaty palms, the heart racing, and then look around and say, you know, am I in any physical danger right now? If you can identify, no, I'm not. And if you are, like, do something. That's
Yeah,
good.
remove
That's
yourself
just
from the situation if you're physically in danger, but if you're
right.
not, right.
But usually we're not, but our bodies and our minds are acting as if we are. So if we can, you know, catch it, ask that question, am I in any physical danger right now? And answer the question with a no, then we can unhook from the fear and get proactive with our lives and see, okay, so what is the healthy thing for me to do right now? And I encourage people, when fear is offering you this bullshit perspective, don't take its advice. Just acknowledge it and then say, no, I'm not going to take that advice. And that's what we're doing almost every time somebody is stepping in front of a bed of hot coals or a bed of broken glass.
Yeah, this
or
to me,
they've got
this sounds fear invoking. I haven't done the firewalking yet, and I'm so excited to try it, but I haven't. I did the virtual UPW with Tony where he does the firewalking. So we couldn't do it, you know, obviously, until I go to an event to try it out. But for me, it's like, okay, I know how powerful the mind is, but how the hell do you still walk across burning hot coals or glass, other than the reality is they don't really exist except in our mind? I don't know. I mean, how does this play out?
Well, the mind is a very powerful thing. And if you're tapped into that fear and you do not change your mind, can you get burned on a fire? Yeah. Can you get, you know, cut by broken glass if you're not aware and mindful in that moment? Yes, you can. But it's about deliberately shifting the mind and learning how to do it.
Okay.
And part of it is that what I just mentioned to you is looking around and asking the question, am I in any physical danger right now? And then we have
Most
certain
people
methods.
would say yes. If they're looking at a flaming hot pit of coals, they'd say, yeah,
Right.
it's going to burn me. My feet are going to melt. So how do you rewire somebody's perception of what they're literally looking at to make them understand that it can't hurt them unless they allow it to hurt them, more or less, right?
Sure. Well, the thing is that's why these empowerment activities are so powerful, because there is that risk
Mhm.
right in front of you. And so, and there's really no way to prove to yourself in these instances that you are safe until you've done it.
Mhm.
And we help people get into a mindset. We call it like a peak mindset,
Mhm.
so that people are basically, they're moving their mind into a space as if they're in a peak experience. And we've all had peak experiences, so we all have memory of peak
Right.
experiences. And that affects our physiology.
Mhm.
It affects how our body responds. And so we ask people to get into this peak state
Okay.
so that they can do these things safely.
Mm.
And anybody can do it. We all experience peak state
Mhm.
moments in our lives. If you just go back in your awareness and ask yourself, when have I felt, like everything was perfect,
Right.
that
I
everything,
I
yeah.
can relate, growing up playing sports and being extremely competitive. And let's say I'd injure myself, like I'd
Mhm.
cut myself or whatever, and I could have blood just pouring down my arm
Yeah.
and feel absolutely nothing. It's not until the awareness that you've injured yourself that the pain turns on and it's like, I'm bleeding or it hurts now. But until you actually saw it, it's almost the idea of entanglement with quantum physics. It's like
Yeah,
until you look at it and see it, the pain doesn't truly exist until it
sure.
does. You know,
Yeah.
I do the maybe, and it's kind of similar maybe in terms of I worked and practiced on the Wim Hof method
Hmm.
year ago and got really good at it. But it was the idea I'd go outside in the snow and just shorts, barefoot, nothing
Yeah,
else. And I'd just hang out there. And I would tell myself, I am warm. The cold does not exist. Hot does not exist. Nothing exists unless I give it meaning. Unless I put some
sure.
sort of a physical meaning on it, then it doesn't exist. And I could find myself hanging out for 10 minutes. I know Wim Hof can do it for virtually ever.
Yeah.
He's mastered his mind so much. But is that really all it is turning off certain, receivers, I guess, in our mind, figuring out how to turn the switch on and off, more or less.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And there are a lot of different ways to do it. It can be through a remembrance of a memory. It can be like through physical movement. It can be through really strong affirmations. There are different ways you can do it, and certain methods work better for certain people. So we just teach them a whole bunch of different ways in like this experiential, I don't know, a container where there's community and bonding and happiness is flowing, so that it really clicks. And this is stuff that it works when you're facing a hotbed of coals, but it also works when you're going into a job interview or into a business proposal meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
These things work in all places in our lives.
It's not just on burning hot coals. It can be
Yeah.
relatable to any obstacle, I guess, that we
Sure.
face, or
Yeah.
any challenge. I guess we can just figure out. I guess that's what it means. Turning on the switch. It's go time.
Hmm.
It's putting
Right.
yourself in that elevated state to
Yeah.
really take on whatever's in front of you.
Yeah, like you mentioned, athletes, they call it being in the zone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Artists call it the still point. It's that place where, most of us who have been driving for a long time can drive without thinking about it. We're in sort of a peak state.
Yeah, I 100% get you there. Like I used to drive long distances for my job. So yeah, I'd pop in an audiobook or whatever, and
Yeah,
6 hours would pass and I'm just, not a care in the world. Don't, all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, how'd I get here? This is amazing.
right.
That went fast. But yeah, so fascinating. I cannot wait to set up some events down the road. We've got to get you out and teaching us all how to firewalk, how to glass walk. What about bending metal? Let's hit that real quick. I saw that on your website. Is that something you teach people as well? Because
I
that's
do.
fascinating. That's as fascinating as firewalking and glass walking. So
isn't it? Yeah,
Yes.
we teach people a couple of other things. So one of them, I don't know if you saw it, was breaking arrows with our throats. So imagine the point of an arrow sticking here
Mhm.
and then walking through it and breaking it with your throat. We do the same
No way.
thing with rebar, with steel rebar,
Uh-huh.
and we can do this individually, or we can do it with two people, where there's a person on each side, each person with the metal rebar at your throat, and moving toward each other and bending it in the middle. It's really extraordinary. The thing
Oh, I've
about
got to
these,
see this. Do you have any videos online I can actually see this?
I'll have to look some up. I'm sure there are some out there somewhere.
That's
There are a
just
lot of,
crazy. To me, it
yeah.
sounds like literally you're teaching people how to step outside of the matrix, how to become Neo in like the real world outside of the when he goes into the matrix and he can dodge bullets and you know
Mhm.
stop them with his bare hand. It's literally like you're the oracle, the real life oracle.
Well, the thing is, we all have this just treasure trove of untapped potential.
Hmm.
And the cool thing about these direct physical experiences is it does something different with our mind. Then we have had a direct physical experience of proving to ourselves that the unbelievable was actually true. This was a big deal for me. When I first learned how to firewalk, I was actually at a retreat to learn about money.
Okay.
And the woman who was teaching it, she ends her retreats with a firewalk.
Mhm.
And I wasn't there to firewalk. I didn't care about firewalking, but by the end of the weekend, I was like, I was ready. I'm going to give it a shot. She taught us how to, all the things that we teach people before they firewalk, and it just gets you ready for it. And
Mhm.
so when I asked myself the question, am I ready to do this? I was. But coming off of that experience, and I had been in the human growth and personal development industry for a long time and had been dedicating a lot of my studies, even up to that point, like my whole life has been a study in this.
Right.
There was something different that happened to me as a result of these direct physical experiences. I noticed that my relationship with fear changed as a result of this in a different way than I had ever experienced before.
That's
And
just
so that you
totally
can think about it,
fascinating.
but
I can't
that
even imagine.
doing something unbelievable gives you a level of proof that is different.
Yes, I think
And
I was
it's
just talking
fun.
about it on a show I was on earlier, and it's that idea of just keep practicing in the belief of our power, whether it's real or not, whether it's happening or not. There's something about that belief and that practicing of it over and over that all of a sudden, when it finally turns on, you can't go back. And you start to kind of realize that true power that we have, this mystical, just almost godlike power that we can create and manipulate and do things that seem like only fantasy, seem like it's only in movies. And all of a sudden we're realizing it's our real life. It's our reality. And yeah, just that spark. I love that.
Yeah. And you can't unsee what you've seen.
Yes,
You can't,
they
you
say you
can't,
can't be put back to sleep. Once we awaken to
no.
this new reality of what's happening, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something, anybody who's ever firewalked with me and myself too, as a firewalker, if I'm buying into my fears' worst advice, there's a part of me that's also saying, yeah, but you walk across hot coals. So get over that and stop listening to it, because you're bigger than that.
I love it. I gotta have you on another time. We got to go deeper into this idea and this topic of firewalking and everything. So let's could you share with everybody, where can they find you? Website, how can they connect with you on social media if they want to work with you, learn more about firewalking and financial spirituality? Give us all the information we need to know.
Sure. I think the simplest way are a couple of websites. One is mine. It's kerrycudmore.com. It's the way my name is spelled, Kerry. CUDMORE.com. And the other website that's specific to the Spiritual Finance Initiative is spiritualfinance.com.
Perfect.
And
Simple enough.
both are on Facebook and Instagram. And if you just Google us, you'll find us.
Fantastic. And like I said earlier, I'll have links in the description box below so that you can reach out to Kerry and work with her if it makes sense and you want to learn more about any of the topics today. All right, Kerry, it's time for our last question I ask every guest that comes on the show. Since this show is dedicated to creating our own reality, if I could snap my fingers instantly and put you in your perfect, ideal heaven, more or less reality, what would that reality look like and why?
The one that comes to mind first is aligned with the mission of the Spiritual Finance Initiative, which is changing our individual and collective relationship with money. And for me personally, everybody's answer is different, but personally, for me, that means a world that is at peace with one another, a world that has an equal and equitable flow of resources where everyone has food and shelter and access to education and transportation and clean water. Like, that's what I want to see. I want to see a peaceful world. I want to witness that firsthand. That's what I wish for.
I have a feeling it's closer at hand than you and I realize on it, and I love it when guests can bring their purpose and their mission in the world into that, project that into that reality. I love that. It's beautiful. I couldn't agree more with you. So thank you so much, Kerry, for coming on the show today. It's been an honor and a privilege, and your knowledge is truly amazing. I can't wait to dive deeper with you in the future. So thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Joey. It's been my pleasure.
You got it. And thank you, everybody who took the time to watch the show today. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it resonated with you, share it with your friends, with your community, your family. If you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, make sure you hit that so that you never miss an episode of Reality Practice or any of the other videos I put out each week. And last but not least, everybody, stay blessed until next time. And always remember to ask yourself, what reality are you choosing to create today? Bye now.